Yes, I budget. Yes, I'm financially responsible. So here's how we incorporate using credit cards into our monthly budget. Hey guys, I'm Marissa and welcome back to my channel. My husband and I have been on our own financial journey for the last 7 years, which initially included us paying off all of our debt, which was 100% student loans when we first got married. We paid off over $87,000 of debt, and I do not like to live with having debt. That being said, we do use credit cards and we have used them even while we were paying off our student loans. Initially, I was under the mentality that credit cards were evil, that they could get you into debt, that it was bad to carry a credit card, but I learned that you could actually use them responsibly and be able to benefit off of the rewards that come from credit cards. Now, this isn't going to be a video about credit card rewards or the best kinds of credit cards to have, but I've been asked the question often of how to use credit cards like in your budget, like the actual breakdown of how it all works, because I do love to budget and record every penny, every transaction, and we do operate off of mostly credit cards. So here's how we do that. So first off, my disclaimer and thing that I will always share about credit cards is only use a credit card if you can pay it off in full. I'm not against credit cards at all, but credit cards have some of the highest interest rates. And if you carry a balance on that credit card, you're going to be spending so much money on interest, and it is simply not worth it. If a credit card is at all a temptation for you, if you find that you're spending more money than you would with a debit card or with cash, don't use the credit card. But if you're going to treat the credit card like I'm going to mention, then go for it. So I have never paid a penny of interest on a credit card because I simply treat it like a debit card. And the way that I do that is I set up our household budget every month, so I know how much money we should be spending on certain categories. And so I'm not using a credit card just to spend money because I have it on credit, but instead I know that I'm going to pay it off every month, and I know that the money that I'm spending on my credit card is actually going to be reflected in my budget and it's holding me accountable. So I'm very wise with how I use a credit card. And that way I'm able to utilize the rewards that come with it. Like for example, we have a USAA credit card that gives us 1.5% cash back. And we love being able to save up that money to then use as our Christmas fund at the end of the year. And so we are able to utilize those benefits and still spend within our budget and not pay a penny of interest with credit cards. Now, if you want to get started using credit cards and you haven't used them before, I'd recommend using like one credit card for a few different categories of things. Like for gas and groceries, like always just use one card for gas and groceries, and that way you can get in more of the habit and see if it would be a temptation for you or not. If it at all becomes a temptation, don't do it, cut it up, be done with it. But if you can manage that responsibly, then it can be really beneficial to put like everything on your credit card to be able to get those points. The other thing to note with credit cards is to only use like maybe a couple credit cards to keep things simple, especially if you're just starting out. It can feel very overwhelming if you have a bunch of cards with different benefits, but instead maybe stick to one or two. And for the longest time, we just had our USAA credit card and we'd use that for the cash back. But then eventually we also signed up for an Alaska Airlines credit card, which gets us a companion fare once a year for flights, which we love, and we use that for a few certain things. And then we also have a Hilton credit card that gets us Hilton points, and we use that for a couple things as well. But the way that I have it is I have like a couple bills that come out automatically on that Alaska Airlines credit card. So it's still being used every month, but it doesn't have a whole lot of things going on it. Most of our expenses will all go through our like main USAA credit card. That way we get all of that cash back. And you can do this depending on which rewards you want to utilize most. So that's how we kind of have ours set up. And the other thing that we do have set up for credit cards is automatically paying off that balance at a certain date. So if the credit card balance closes on like the 28th of the month, then I have an auto draft set up to pull like and pay off the entire balance before the 28th. That way I will never forget to do this, and it's on automation, and that way I won't have to pay a penny of interest. I will say I actually do go in and pay off that credit card balance a couple times each month whenever I feel like it gets to a certain threshold that I would like it to be lower. So I do pay it off like myself. I'll go in and make an additional payment, but again, I'm never carrying over that balance to the next month. So the next thing I do with our credit cards is I then record all of our credit card transactions into our budget. If you want to get started with budgeting, I have a budget template available for download. It's very affordable. It's in Excel or Google Sheets, whatever you want to use for spreadsheet. And I will have a link to that in the description box down below, and you can check it out there. This is a budget template that I use and have been using for for many years, and it's worked for us. So, with a budget, I will enter in our budgeted amount for all of our categories at the beginning of the month. And then throughout the month, I'm recording the transactions or the money that we're spending throughout the month. So I will go on and pull up our regular bank account, because there's some expenses that just come out of our bank account. And then I will also pull up our credit card transaction history, and then I will enter in every expense that we've spent money on in my budget spreadsheet. And there's a section in that template that I have for sale where you can enter in all of your transactions. And so I'll go in, enter everything that I had on the credit card into my budget spreadsheet. And when you do this while using a credit card, it's so important for you to actually record the category that you're spending money on rather than just labeling it as credit card. So I know that some people will just have a credit card line item in their budget, but then you just have a lot of money as a line item, but you don't know where that money's actually being spent. I want to know exactly where every dollar is being spent. And so if I spend money on groceries with my credit card, then I enter that into my grocery category in my budget. And so when I do my budget update videos, you will not see any sort of category called credit card, but instead you'll see just regular categories. And I've even had a couple people say I thought you used a credit card. I do. I use it for almost all of these expenses, but I allocate them to the specific category that they came from rather than having a credit card line item in the budget. And I think this is the most important thing that you need to do when you're using a credit card, because you want to know where this money is being spent and if you need to make any adjustments to your spending habits depending on your credit card usage and depending on where you're seeing that money in your budget. And if you want to double check that you recorded every transaction, a way that you can do this is pull your credit card statement at the end of the month and then compare that to what your budget says so that you know that you got everything there. You could, check off everything individually, or you could also just look at the total spent and then filter your transactions by that credit card that you spent on, and you could see how much money you spent in total on that credit card and compare it to that statement balance to see if you got everything. And if you didn't, then go line by line to make sure you got all of your transactions in there. That would be reconciling your credit card statement to your budget. I worked in accounting before I quit to do YouTube full time, and so this is something that I did every month, and I honestly loved it. It's really fun to do a bank rec. If you work in accounting and you've done a bank rec, it's the most fun thing ever. Let me know in the comments below. But that is an easy way for you to make sure that you caught all of your transactions. But one thing to note is that your credit card may close not at the end of the month, but at a different day in the month. So just another thing to note, that your dates may not match up perfectly to what your monthly budget is, or if you budget by paycheck. So just something to be aware of and check into looking at if you need to. But for entering in my transactions, I will sit down once a week every Sunday and just enter in all of my credit card transactions. And then when I sit down for the week later, I go back and look at where I left off, look at a couple line items, because some things will post as pending, and then they'll actually fully post and the dates will be a little bit different on the transactions. So I go and make sure that I accounted for the last 5 or 6 things, and then I start my new transactions for the week for updating my budget. So that is how I manage credit cards in my budget. You can do both. You can use a credit card responsibly and benefit from the rewards that it brings, and it can also help with building your credit score as well. But please do not ever carry a balance on your credit card. Do not ever pay a dime in interest. You don't need to. You can simply just benefit from these credit card rewards while still being a responsible budgeter and credit card user. If you notice that you're really overspending on some categories in your budget, then maybe you need to adjust the way that you're using credit cards or take a step back to refresh, because I also don't want you to be overspending just because you're using a credit card and it makes it easier. It shouldn't if you are budgeting and have a plan for those expenses in your budget. So let me know in the comments below if you use a credit card and how you do so with your budget. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more budget and lifestyle videos, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.